I believe in safety. I believe in, he's going to talk about emergency action plan. I was a head coach back in the early 2000s and all that good stuff, and AD, and I think I was a stickler on my coaches about emergency action plan, who, where, who. When we sit down and have briefing, you're going to brief, I sit down and act dumb. Who doing this, who doing that? Because I believe in those type of things, especially with other people's kids. So it's very important to me, but I wanted him to be able to come here and talk about his experience, because again, safety is the foremost thing that I believe in the game of football, okay? Because again, in the day, 1.3. That's NFL. So we want to say we want to get you to the fifth quarter, have you safe, first and foremost, okay? Further ado, Mr. Marty McNair.
Hey, family, good morning. I like to call this the Can My Child Play Safety Series. And the reason that I even call it, because obviously, as Coach just said, I lost my son Jordan back in 2018. A lot of you all may have heard the story. It was like one of the most talked about sports stories literally for about 2 years. Jordan had a heat stroke the very first day of his sophomore year, and he got to the hospital an hour and 46 minutes later with a core body temperature of 106 degrees. We literally went from a healthy kid Tuesday morning to an emergency liver transplant Friday morning, with him being literally within 12 hours of his life. The doctor specifically told his mom and dad, if we don't make a decision to get an emergency liver transplant right now, Jordan will be dead in 12 hours. So, as you all probably can imagine, I'm saying to myself, what happened? And I'm using the term heat stroke very, very loosely at this time. So, what happened that day on the field, they were running the very first day of practice. And it's interesting because this is our second session, the second parent session. And it's always kind of like, what did I say the first time? And telling you about our story, they were running gases the very first day of practice. The equivalent of the football field 10 times. You got a minute, you got 20 up, 20 second break. The very first day of practice. It wasn't a hot day, but it was a humid day. Now, keep in mind, at this particular time, I had no idea what a heat stroke was. I'm using the term heat stroke very loosely. I basically thought that if you were in the sun too long, basically all you need to do was get some shade, drink some cool water, and everything else would be right with the world. See, I didn't know the magnitude of a heat stroke in layman's terms that we can all understand is the equivalent of your body being in a microwave oven. When your core body temperature goes above 104 degrees, your organs start to cool. You have a 20 to 30 minute window to cool that core body temperature down. If you don't, you will be in our scenario. You will have the conversation of a liver transplant less than 3 days later, with 85% of your child's liver being dead. That's a heat stroke. And at this particular time, it took literally an hour and 46 minutes to get Jordan to the hospital. So his core body temperature literally was that high for that long. So our very last conversation where he and I both spoke basically was May 28th. And it was that Monday, May 28th, and it was basically, hey son, I know practice starts tomorrow. Have a great day. How you feeling? Dad, I'm good. Because you know when they get to college, and you all, if you don't have any college kids, you'll see the answers turned into one line. Yeah, I'm good. And if they on a good scholarship, they ain't even gonna call because they get money out of the scholarship. They'll call for that ride home on the weekends, but the conversation gets very, very limited at the collegiate level. So I talked to him, I said, son, I know practice starts tomorrow. And then the next day, my conversation went from, son, if you can hear me, squeeze my fingers. Son, if you can hear me, blink your eyes. Because when we got to the ER that very next day, we had got a call saying there's been an incident on the field. This is this is the campus police officer at the University of Maryland. Jordan had a seizure on the football field. And at this time, I'm really not a panic button pusher type guy. I can remember I was literally sitting in my mom's kitchen. I just literally came back from Cuba 2 days prior, and I was showing her some pictures from my adventure that particular time, and I got this call. As soon as the campus police officer said, hey, this is the hospital, I was already out the door and right to get Jordan's mom. Now, at this particular time, I'm saying, hey, a seizure, Jordan's 6'5", 300 pounds, a size 16 shoe, with literally with shoe boxes full of every possible school that offered him across the nation. Big Ten, SEC, ACC, you name it. I can go on and on and on. The very first day of practice, the very first day as a junior, we had 500 pieces of mail that arrived that day. He was a lineman's lineman. Had never been in the hospital except for the day that he was born. So when somebody's telling me a seizure, I'm basically like, okay, well, let's get to the hospital first. So when we got to the hospital, the first two questions now, the name of my book is Can My Child Play? The questions we should have asked, because as parents, I ask the same two questions. Anybody know what they are? Can he play? And why isn't he playing? Because as parents, that's all we think about. Can they play and why are they sitting on the bench? Those are, I guarantee you, nobody in this room, if you've asked any other questions besides that, raise your hand. That's what I do. Yep. Can they play and why aren't they playing? See, we don't think to ask all the questions because even while he's at the University of Maryland, we decided to go with University of Maryland. The coaches a couple days prior to signing day were at our kitchen table, and I basically asked two questions. Can he get some playing time, which is one, and then I asked another question about mental health and substance abuse support, because that was just the business that I was in at that time. I didn't think to ask in the event that my child gets hurt, what do you want to do? And I want to go back, because somebody in the last session just asked me, what's 3 takeaways you want people, if they can't buy your book, what's 3 takeaways you want everybody in the room to take away? I'm going to give it to you now, and I'm going to circle back. Do you have an emergency action plan first? Do you have any type of medical training, medical staff, or athletic training staff? And then always ask, in the event of, what systems do you all have in place? You got an EAP, you got your medical training staff, athletic trainers, and most colleges do, but the thing is, here's a Big Ten school that I literally took all this for granted. And in the event of, what are you all going to do? Because see, when the coaches were sitting at our table, you know what they told us, right? We're going to treat him like he's one of our own. Coach didn't call me to tell me something happened to my child. A campus police officer told me something happened to my child. But this ain't the same guy that was sitting at my table this last year, this time during recruitment time. So a lot of times, family, this is the things that can possibly happen to your child. And I'm glad to be a part of what Coach Tink and Coach Joe are doing here, because really, a lot of times I've taken Jordan to many of these things. I got emotional when I was just walking around to the front because I could see all those big guys, and I remember Jordan used to be one of those guys when I would take him to the Under Armour camp, the Nike camp, the Adidas combines, you name it, the Army combines in Texas. Wherever I took him at, it was always the same thing. But the one thing that was always the common denominator that was always missing, they never went in conversations like this. See, all I ever did was sit in the stands, like I'm sure most of us have whenever we take them in clinics, combines, camps. We just sit in the stands and watch them participate. Has anybody ever really pulled us to the side and say, parents, this is what student athlete safety looks like. This is the thing, the system that should be in place. This is what an emergency action plan stays in place, or should be in place. So these were the things that we decided, because I know when Jordan passed, after he had this emergency liver transplant, obviously he was literally connected to every life support that you could possibly imagine. He was hooked up to an ECMO machine, that was for your liver. He was hooked up to a lung machine. He was hooked up to 2 dialysis machines. He was hooked up to, you name it, all life support. And unfortunately, I just think that there was so much damage done that hour and 46 minutes that obviously it wasn't the equivalent of putting a new liver in. That's like we putting a new battery in and all was going to be right with the world. So I think the damage was just too much, too excessive. So we had to make a decision. And a lot of times, when you're in that position and this is your child, your only child, you're thinking as a father like, hey, what did I do wrong? What did I prepare him for? And see, what I didn't prepare him for after Jordan passed was, I taught Jordan everything, how to always be a leader, never be a follower, always stand up for yourself, don't be afraid to fight, especially don't be afraid to fight your peers. But as a parent and as a father, I never told him if he felt uncomfortable doing something with Coach Jackson to do, don't do it. If he saw something happening to one of his teammates that he wasn't comfortable with, to speak up on. I never taught my son self-advocacy, because what I did was, like many of us in this room, I'm sure I probably taught him to be coachable. See, when we teach our kids to be coachable, all we really teach them is to be robots. Because the coach say run head first through that door, what are they going to do? Out of all the deaths that have happened since Jordan passed, and we have a network, and I talk to a lot of families literally across the nation, in West Texas and Tennessee and Louisiana and Kentucky, where all these deaths type happen, whether it's cardiac arrest, whether it's heat stroke, whether it's spinal cord injury, whether it's blood for sickle cell. You know what the kids usually always say when they trying to push their last piece out? I don't want to lose my spot. I can push a little harder, I just don't want to lose my spot. And this is what we can't blame coaching them all the time. We got to look at what we create as well. So, as we went on in our process, Jordan passed June the 13th, 2018, and I knew that our story had to be, we had to make an impact, because Jordan's mom, Tanya, and I, while he was in the hospital those weeks, we kept asking ourselves, if we don't know these things, how many other parents in America don't know these things? See, because the interesting thing was, I had no idea about the stats of all the student athletes that had died, especially in the NCAA, from heat stroke. Most of the time, it's usually linemen, your bigger guys, your beefier guys, because they're carrying the majority of the weight. And what an idiot does, gasses the very first day of practice. You know, this is the thing. No offense, coach. No offense. But parents, we have to be mindful, because a lot of times when we look at prevention when it comes to coaches, right? I'm doing a coach's training at the Under Armour game tomorrow, Thursday, one day this week in Florida, the UA All-American game. So one of the interesting things when we really kind of got down to our curriculums of education, we had the Ken My Child play safety surgery. That's for parents. That's for this crowd. And then we had the X's and O's of player safety, which is for coaches. And then we have the Kobe session, and that's for our student athletes, right? But the interesting thing I noticed was, when we see coaches do things, it's very, very disheartening to see a coach talk to your kid in a way that you wouldn't talk to him. Very, very interesting or disheartening to see coaches talk to your kid and they're denying them water. They're doing all these things that it ain't going to toughen them up. It's only going to make a bad situation worse. Or yelling at your child to the point where at the end of the day, if a kid don't have it to give, they don't have it to give, regardless of how much you yell, jump up and down. Coach, if my VO2 and my VO2 has outreached my carbon dioxide put out, I'm done. No matter how hard you yell at me, no matter how much you yell at me. So the foundation where our main focus was, I told you I started 3 days after Jordan passed, and the main goal at that particular time was really to create a space of student athlete self-advocacy. Listen to your body. Listen to your body. And parents and family, if you walk away with nothing today beyond the 3 things, the 3 points that I told you about earlier, make sure you encourage your student athletes, implore to them, I beg you, plant that seed right now of self-advocacy. Listen to your body. When your body tells you to stop, stop. And they combine all these different things. Oh, pain is just something leaving the body, and all that BS the kids combine it to. Teach your kid, in the event of, if they feel hurt, say something. If they see something going on that they don't like, say something. Because Coach Stink just mentioned it a little earlier. We live in an age of one-liners. Anybody know what that is? I'm sure we all experience. Hey, how was school today? Oh, it was good. We'll just accept that. You doing okay? Yeah, I'm good. But what was it about? But the thing is, I never asked my son, do you feel uncomfortable? Never had a reason to. He never said anything. But a lot of the older kids on the team, and it was interesting because when Jordan passed, there was so many parents on the University of Maryland team at the time, and they just kept calling, like, because we had the voice at this point. And it was like, please say something. Because I remember when the coaches changed, they went through 3 different coaches at that particular time. And when these new coaches came in, and a lot of the older guys, they were calling home to their parents, and some of them were crying because regardless at the end of the day, whether they're 6'10", 6'5", 6'6", at the end of the day, they're only 17, 19, 20-year-olds. They're still kids. Regardless of how big their feet are, regardless of how much they eat, regardless of all these things, they're still kids. Jordan used to still call home at 6'5", 300 plus pounds. At 19 years, he used to call home and ask his mom, could he go out on the weekend still? Coach just said it. We're going to have 2 years. We got both of them 80 now, but it's hard for social media. We need all the help that we can get, because I guarantee you, they ain't listening to us, they gonna listen to somebody. And the main goal is, if not, you don't keep both of them ears, you better keep one of them, or pray you can keep one of them, because they're gonna always think that somebody's smarter than us. We the ones that got you. I was just telling the young man from the last session, I'm like, man, your dad knows everything. You don't think he does, but I guarantee you, he ain't gonna never steer you wrong. And those are the things, because again, it becomes repetitive with us. So as we started the foundation back in 2018, one of the things that I realized was, okay, cool, they didn't have a cold water tub on the field that day. So we donated all these cold water tubs, literally over 300 tubs, literally from Alaska to Florida. But one of the main things was 2019 was a horrendous year, 2020 was a horrendous year, 21 was a horrendous year. Kids kept dying. Kids kept dying from heat stroke. The four main culprits are heat stroke, cardiac arrest, concussion, and what we call hemoglobin, which is blood. If you got a kid that has any type of sickle cell or anything like that, that can present as a heat stroke, but again, it can be way more damaging than this. So what I ask parents to do not let your kid walk on anybody's field. Don't let them play with anybody if you do not tell the coach or tell an organization, the school or whatever, what your child's medical conditions are, their pre-existence. Don't let your kid walk on if they got sickle cell. Don't let them, because again, it'll present one way, and if nobody, and you can't blame the coaching organization or the school or whatever the case may be, if we don't ask the right questions up front. So we just can't assume anymore. I assumed that a Big Ten school would take care of my son, and obviously that ain't what happened. I wouldn't be standing here if they did. Parents, again, I ask you, and family, I ask you that plant these seeds of self-advocacy now. I guarantee you, rest assured, kids already buy into it. They done bought into it. But at the end of the day, rest assured, plant the seeds of self-advocacy now from the perspective of, guess what, if it don't look right, taste right, smell right, and bottom line, if you're not uncomfortable, if you're just not comfortable, don't do it. Because at the end of the day, you're coming back home. See, I can't wait to talk to the kids because I'm really going to give them a shot. Because the game of sports, any football, soccer, track, nobody ever stopped the game because a kid died. You haven't. With my son, you know what they did? They didn't stop the first game. They literally walked out in honor with his jersey, waved a bunch of flags, put a whole bunch of the number 79 in the ground, whatever the case may be on the football field. Where was all that attention at prior to? If I had asked the right questions, I could have made an informed decision. And that's what I'm asking you, and that's the whole purpose of education. Do not let your child play. Do not let them walk on anybody's court. Anybody, even if you got the younger ones. Don't let your babies walk on it. If they can't show you any type of emergency. Anybody know what an emergency action plan is? So the emergency, an EAP is the equivalent of a fire. So imagine most of us at work, prior to COVID, we were in office buildings. You know how we had to go out onto, they probably ran a fire drill. It's a fire drill. But the interesting thing with sports is every time you walk out on the field, the potential for a fire can happen. Every single time. Every single time. It's not that, oh, the building may burn down. No. Every time you walk out on the field, something could potentially happen. And the interesting thing is, out of all these deaths that consistently happen, the one common denominator, and guess what? I've gotten 4 laws passed in the state of Maryland from the AAU level all the way up to the collegiate level. NIL bills, high school bills, middle schools, all around student athlete safety. The most impactful bill that we just got passed was July 1st of this year, House Bill 836. But what it does, it mandates that the emergency action plan is followed twice a year. If it was up to me, I wanted it done every quarter. But they do it every spring season, every fall season. That's the equivalent. As adults, you know, anybody know what delayed retention is? Let me give you an example. If we all took a CPR class right now, I think it's 32 to 2 or 30 to 2 impressions or whatever the case may be, and we went through everything, and guess what? Maybe let's not say that we never even had a cardiac arrest that even may have been in our sight probably 8, 9 months from now. Would anybody really remember 30 and 2? We not. Now, if we had CPR training twice a year, we were working with a vulnerable community or a vulnerable demographic, we would probably remember, okay, 32 breaths or 30 breaths for 2 compressions. So a lot of times, family, if they're not these schools or these organizations that we're sending our children in their care, our most prized possessions, just think about that. How can we send, or how could I send my most prized possession into an environment under somebody else's care and I didn't prepare him the way I should have prepared him? Those are my thoughts. And I don't want those to be anybody else's thoughts, but just think about it. Here, we're going to send you out of town to a school, coaching them, saying all the right things. We like them and they like us and they want you and all that type of stuff. But man, give your kids some information to protect them. Because a lot of times we may be so far away that we may can't be in driving distance. Or we may can't get there in a blink of an eye. We might got to catch a flight. And so again, prepare your student athletes now. I ask that you, I implore, prepare them now. Plant the seeds of advocacy. It's never too late. Let them know, again, I can't say, I tell kids all the time, if it don't smell, taste, look, touch, forget about it. Don't do it. Because I think young people think that they want to go home and live with coach if it don't work out. You're coming back home to us. We're your biggest support system. So again, I ask everybody, please do these things. That emergency action plan is key. The 3 things that I ask everybody to take away, if you don't do nothing else, listen to anything. Before, because a lot of you all in the recruiting process, I'm going to tell you, that thing, man, let me tell you, they sound like used car salesmen, coach. Once you listen to enough of them, you be like, wow, all of them sound good, and all of them sound the same. Then you start bringing other family members in, like, just give me your ear, don't say nothing. Just tell me what you, am I hearing the same thing you hearing? That's the recruitment process. Guess what? Everybody in here gets student athletes, 5-star athletes, or their star rankings right now? Anybody 5-star, 3-star, 4-star? Okay. Everybody at the collegiate level was 3, 4-star, from 3 on to a 5. You know, a lot of times be smart when it comes to recruiting. You know, I know this ain't my lane. I talk players say, but see, encourage it. Our job as parents is like Coach said earlier. Our goal is to think about the 5th quarter. It ain't in the buy into your dreams. You're gonna make it to the NFL. Coach said it, 1.3. That's saying out of all these people in this room, ain't but one and a third of us gonna make it. But everybody think they're gonna make it. Use sports as a tool. Get everything you can. We went to Ohio State. I'm gonna tell you a funny story before I conclude. You know, when you a parent, you're gonna do everything you gotta do for your kids. Short of breaking the law. Funny story. So I've always been a business owner. So I was in between businesses, and 2015, everything had went. Car insurance went. I went out to the dealership, got a tag, my stickers was dirty, right? I'm riding dirty. I ain't got no car insurance. I don't have my tags suspended. George said, Dad, they want me to come to Ohio State this weekend. So Ohio to Maryland might be about 5 or 6 hours. And I'm saying, son, really this weekend or all weekend? He had just got his driver's license. And we literally rode up to Ohio State. And I mean, literally like all these little one-way highways coming up 70 around Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. And it's all these little towns you're coming through, and they got all these sheriffs sitting right there on the edge of the road looking to catch you. As he kept saying, Dad, let me drive. I'm like, no, I got it. We get to Ohio State, and as last speaker just had, we got through an educational session. They had a couple players there, you know, one of the red carpet rollout days. And I remember Jordan was ahead of me in front of with a couple of the other players that were there visiting. So when we left out this educational session, we went to auditorium. So when we came out, I shot out the door looking for him. So as soon as I cut the corner, he was in Coach Meyer's office, Urban Meyer's office at the time. So he was like, yeah, Dad, come in. And Coach Urban Meyer made such a very good point. He said, man, whether you all come here and decide to come to Ohio State or not, 2 things. Make sure you get a lifetime scholarship. In the event he leaves, go to the league, and always come back, get a scholarship, or finish his degree. And also, these people are going to get every single thing they can get out of you. You better get the same. And this is a major player, Urban Meyer. He did better at Ohio State than he did in the league, but still, that piece of information always resonated with me. So when we got to Maryland, it was one of those things what caught our attention was, for us, it was always life after football. Kids think as kids think. 19-year-old, 20-year-old, 18-year-old, 17-year-old, they think like kids. So they see it. It's not our job to buy into the way that they think. We're thinking about life after football. We're thinking about getting that degree in 3.5 years with some summer school credits, and if you get redshirted, you can get a master's degree in 5. That's the big picture of what it is a lot of you all already experience. But the main thing is, like I said, like Coach said earlier, player safety is important, family. I guarantee you, ask the right questions. Don't be in a position like ours. Guess what? At the end of the day, 5 years ago, you couldn't have never told me that I'd be standing in front of rooms sharing our story. You couldn't, I always thought I had a book in me, but guess what? My book was more about some street fiction, riding in the street and all that type of stuff. I never thought I'd write books where people would be listening to me. I never thought that I would be on national TV. I never thought I'd be the voice of this. I never thought Jordan would be the face of this. When you look at Heat Stroke, you see two people. You see Corey Stringer from the Minnesota Vikings, if you're old enough, am I right? And most of the time, lately, you see Jordan. They usually put their names right together. But family, the three takeaways. How many single moms are here before I sing one? I guarantee this is gonna sound good. And you got coach sitting at your table and you just so caught up in the hype. Be smart. Ask them questions. And guess what? If he can play, they can play. They're gonna see him everywhere, anywhere. You know, don't get wooed. Don't get wooed, because again, I think that coaches at the recruiting level all sound good. I think we got wooed. Now that I look back, because I only asked those two questions: am I mad at them, or should I have been more educated? So, do you have an EAP? Do you have any medical training staff? And in the event of my child get hurt, my child can't play anymore, what systems do you all have in place? And if you ask those three questions before you make an informed decision, regardless of where they want to go at, you make the best decisions. Thank you, everybody.